Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Henry Bogdan from Maryland Nonprofits. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the General Election Candidate Forum for the Office of Maryland State Comptroller. This forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Maryland, the Schaefer Center for Public Policy, the University of Baltimore, Maryland Nonprofits, Maryland Reporter, Maryland Matters, and Maryland Latino Unidos. The League of Women Voters of Maryland is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League's mission is to empower voters and protect democracy. To learn more about the upcoming election, the candidates, the offices they're seeking, and important statewide and local ballot questions, go to vote411.org, and that link will appear in the chat. The University of Baltimore Schaefer Center for Public Policy is a nonpartisan applied research and service organization that leverages the expertise of the university community in its work to inform decision makers through applied research and program evaluation, develop public servants through its professional development program, promote public discourse through policy analysis and conferences, and grow future leaders through fellowships and applied learning activities for students. Maryland Nonprofits is a statewide association of more than 1,500 nonprofit organizations and institutions with members in every county of the state. Our mission is to strengthen organizations and networks for greater quality of life and equity, and we're celebrating our 30th anniversary this year. Maryland Nonprofits is also home of the Standards for Excellence Institute. MarylandReporter.com is the original nonprofit news website covering state government and politics in Maryland. Founded in 2009 and recognized by the IRS as a 501c3 tax-exempt organization, MarylandReporter.com does original coverage and also produces a daily roundup of coverage of government and politics from news sites and bloggers across Maryland. Foundations helped start Maryland Reporter, and it is supported by private donors, foundations, and sponsors. This election year, it's also producing online voter guides for statewide and local candidates. Maryland Matters is a statewide news website focusing on state government and politics. It was launched in 2017 as a blog and is now also recognized as a 501c3 tax-exempt organization by the IRS. They began publishing daily news reports in 2018. They now have more reporters covering the State House than the Baltimore Sun and Washington Post combined. Maryland Matters funding comes from reader donations and foundation grants. And Maryland Latinos Unidos is a statewide network that collaborates and builds collective power for the benefit of Maryland's Latino and immigrant communities. MLU members are organizations, businesses, and individuals who support Latino and immigrant communities across Maryland. MLU addresses challenges faced by emerging communities, provides technical assistance for community-serving organizations, builds links to all levels of government, and advances knowledge of the Latino community through research and outreach. Just a quick technical note, you should be aware this forum is being recorded, and the recording will be available after the event. In addition to tonight's event, the sponsors are also hosting a gubernatorial forum that will occur on October 13th at 7 o'clock, moderated by Len Lazarick from Maryland Reporter and Josh Kurtz from Maryland Matters. Candidates Cox, Lasher, Wallace, and Harding are confirmed to participate. There will also be published on the line later interviews, separate interviews with Attorney General candidates Brown and Peruka that'll be recorded and posted on the same website. All forums and taped interviews will be available at the UBalt Public Affairs YouTube channel shortly after their conclusion. That link will also be in the chat. Finally, it's important that everyone vote. To learn more about the upcoming election, the candidates and the offices they're seeking, as well as statewide and local ballot questions, again, visit vote411.org. That link is in the chat, and also a link to the Maryland Matters voter information is in the chat. When can you vote? Early voting begins on Thursday, October 27, and goes through Thursday, November 3rd. The general election day, of course, is November the 8th. Requests for a mail-in ballot must be received by November 1. Mail-in ballots must be postmarked or placed in a designated ballot box by 8 p.m. on November 8th, Election Day. The deadline to register to vote is October 18, and in person is on Election Day, known as same-day registration. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this evening, Josh Kurtz, the founding editor of Maryland Matters. Josh.
Thank you, Henry, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to our candidates, Republican Barry Glassman, the county executive of Harford County, and the Democrat, Delegate Brooke Lierman of Baltimore City. Welcome also to our audience. So here's how it's going to work. The candidates will begin with 2-minute opening statements, and then we'll have a series of questions that were prepared by a committee of the sponsors of these events. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer these questions. If a candidate feels like a rebuttal, they will have 30 seconds to follow up. We had a random drawing to determine who would give the first opening statement. After that, we will just kind of go back and forth in order. At the end, we will have 3-minute closing statements from the candidates. Our timekeeper is Nancy Soring from the League of Women Voters of Maryland. You won't see her, but she's running a clock, which will appear on the screen. The screen will turn yellow when 15 seconds remain for an answer, and it will turn red and the word stop will appear when time is up. Candidates may finish their sentence, but they should stop speaking then. So that's it. Without further ado, let's begin with a 2-minute opening statement from Harford County Executive Barry Glassman.
Good evening. It's good to see everyone this evening. I want to thank all of the sponsors for bringing us together this evening so we can have this forum and talk about some of the great things that we want to do for the Comptroller's office. Barry Glassman, the Harford County Executive. Just a little bit about me. I'm born and raised in Harford County and on a small farm. Been blessed over the years to start as a volunteer fireman, but end up as a county executive. And in between, I worked for Baltimore Gas and Electric Company in their legal department and retired there after about 25 years. And in between that, I had some part-time jobs, the Harford County Council, the Maryland House of Delegates for 8 years, and the Maryland State Senate for 7 years there before I became Harford County Executive. So that's just a little bit about me. I'm married, have one son, and been a grandfather just for 15 months, which I really have enjoyed so far. I'm really running for Maryland's next comptroller to really bring my skill set to the job. We have done so well here in Harford County, and I'm the only candidate left out of the 6 remaining candidates that has actually ran a local government. Harford County's the 8th largest jurisdiction in the state of Maryland. We've balanced state budgets, 24 AAA bond ratings, and we have a pension fund, procurement. So many of the activities that are charged to the comptroller's office are really similar to what I've done in local government. And we look forward to trying to bring that skill set to this campaign and to the office of comptroller.
Thank you. Delegate Lierman, opening statement, please.
Thanks so much, Josh, and thank you to Maryland Matters and to the League of Women Voters for bringing us together and for all of the important work that you do. It's great to see everybody. I'm Brooke Lierman. I'm a civil rights and disability rights attorney. I'm a public school graduate of public schools in Maryland. I'm a public school mom of 2. I'm a leader in the House of Delegates, where I've served for 2 terms representing downtown Baltimore City. And I'm thrilled to now be the Democratic nominee for state comptroller. You know, this is an incredibly important election. For the first time since 1998, we have an open seat for state comptroller. And, we haven't for 100 years had every statewide seat open on the ballot. And that really means that the 2022 election is and be bold so that we can all do better. We're coming out of an incredibly challenging time, and we need to make sure that we're there for Maryland. And that's what I've spent my life doing. In college, I saw the huge disparity that existed between my college campus and the rural poverty around it. So I helped start a mentoring program to work with children in public housing. Today, that program works in 4 different states with thousands of children. As an attorney, I've been leading and winning for working people, unpaid low-wage workers, and also across the nation. And for the past 8 years as a state delegate, I've been advocating for and organizing with the communities in my district, while also passing major bipartisan bills, spreading affordable broadband, securing a woman's right to choose, supporting our public schools, making it easier to do business in the state, and more. I've also helped oversee our $52 billion budget plus on the Appropriations Committee, and I've chaired the Joint Pension Committee. That's why I know and understand that our state comptroller is more than just a bean counter. It's an office that's uniquely situated as the elected CFO to focus on the economic challenges and the income-based issues that we face as a state. And I'm excited to bring this bold vision to this office and the ability to bring people together to get things done. As the CFO, the comptroller's office is truly essential to building a more equitable, sustainable, and prosperous state. And I'm ready to jump in now to all the great questions I know are coming. Thanks to everybody for tuning in.
Thanks, Delegate. I need to quickly ask, and I hate to do it. Are you all seeing the clock? Because I am not.
Yeah, I can see.
Candidates, you can see.
Hop right to your screen really quick. Just click on the view and then click on gallery.
Okay, good enough. Thank you.
We
Sorry
didn't
about that.
violate our time. Don't worry, Josh.
No, okay, good. Well, actually, I wanted to, Delegate Lierman, you'll get the question first, and then County Executive Glassman will. Give us just kind of like a civics lesson for what you see the key functions of the comptroller's office being.
Sure. 2 minutes on the comptroller's office. This is a huge agency. I mean, the comptroller is one of only 3 independently elected statewide officials that we have in Maryland, right? Many other states have many more. We have 3, the governor, the attorney general, and the comptroller. The comptroller sees every dollar in and every dollar out in Maryland. It's our elected CFO. The comptroller also sits on incredibly important boards like the State Retirement and Pension Board and the Board of Maryland. And very importantly, will help decide how we're spending our tax dollars and how we're spending all of the money that the federal government is sending, right? From the infrastructure investment our state will have seen ever, and more than we'll ever see in our lifetime again. And we have one opportunity to make sure we spend that money in a way that reaches our small businesses in Maryland, that makes sure that we're working with our minority business enterprises and more. And that makes sure that we're funding and investing in our infrastructure in a way that builds climate resilience in the state. And then, of course, finally, the comptroller is the tax collector. Sorry to remind everybody, but there too, as the tax administrator, there's so much that the comptroller's office can do. You're not just taking in money, you're providing a service, right? This is about providing customer service to families in Maryland, to small businesses. We need to make it easier to do business in the state of Maryland by modernizing our IT systems. And I've worked on that in the legislature, passing legislation, but even more, we also need to make sure that people who have tax credits owed to them, they can claim them, whether it's the earned income tax credit or the senior tax credit, making it easier to claim those credits. So the comptroller is a service provider. It's the elected CFO of the state and has to do big things while also sweating the small stuff.
Thanks. County Executive Glassman, give us your sort of civics lesson of what the comptroller's office does.
Thank you, Josh. And I'm sure Delegate Lierman, it's funny with this campaign, you do spend, I guess, the first part of your presentations kind of educating folks on what the comptroller does. Sometimes I think, the gubernatorial and some of these other races are more exciting, and the comptroller, you've got to do a little civics lessons at the beginning. And, we try to relate the comptroller's position to what I do as a county executive. We estimate each year to see how much money that we're going to have to spend. The comptroller sits on the board of revenue estimates and has to look into that magic revenue ball and give the governor and the legislative branch an idea of where the state is on revenue. They also sit on the very important board of public works as a member. The governor sits there from the executive branch, the treasurer, and the comptroller sort of sits there. I like to refer as the taxpayer's representative, to make sure every dollar is spent wisely. And so those are the things that we talk about, in addition to running a pension system. Harford County, we are 100% funded. Our ARC is 100% funded. And so we work to do that. We go to the bond market every year and work. We have AAA bond ratings. It is a very technical fiscal fiduciary role. And I think we need experience to do that. And it's only part of the job as Delegate Lierman. The other is to make sure the phones are answered, returns are done. People are in the regional offices that can help our constituents, the actual customer. And so there's a lot to do on that side of the ledger too, as a customer service rep. And there are some things we'll talk about later that I think we can do to make service better for our constituents. And finally, I always to say you're the watchdog of the taxpayer.
All right, well, let's keep going here with you, Mr. Glassman. This may be tough in 2 minutes, but just talk about some of your priorities if you're elected comptroller.
Well, first of all, when just traveling around the state, I still hear, and when I became county executive, customer service was very important. So one of the neat things about getting to visit all the counties and traveling is you do hear from a lot of taxpayers. And I think it's important for the next comptroller to keep his ear to the ground and go out and talk to small businesses and taxpayers. But there still seems to be, and some of it may be because of leftover from the pandemic, but I think we still hear from a lot of folks that can't get a call returned, sit on hold, have to leave a message, or can't get an answer to a question about what they're going to pay for the quarter. And so I think there are some improvements that need to be done there. Quite clearly, ramp up staffing at the regional offices, but also I think the digital platforms in the comptroller's office clearly need to be modernized. The bookkeeping, everything from constituent services, we need a top-down look at the digital infrastructure to make sure, as we guide other areas of state government, to make sure the comptroller's office is as innovative and efficient as they can be with the internet and providing those type of services to our taxpayers. That's
Thank you.
Tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, that's right. Delegate Lierman, how about some of your priorities? 2 minutes worth of priorities if you're elected.
So much to say, and I'm sorry about my screen freezing. I have all my bars, so I'm not sure what's going on, but priorities in the comptroller's office. First and foremost, I've been traveling around the state for the past 18 months, hearing from people, from seniors who are concerned about inflation, about the cost of living rising. I've been talking to educators and parents who are concerned about public schools. I think what we need to do first and foremost is be transparent and accountable, and set up transparent and accountable systems to make sure that as our tax dollars and all of the federal money is flowing through the state, that we are holding ourselves and every agency accountable, right? That we are reducing waste and fraud wherever we can find it. And we're doing that in a proactive way, right? In my mind, being a watchdog means you're waiting for something bad to happen. We have to be present and proactive in ensuring that we're stopping waste and fraud from the get-go from ever happening. And to think through how we're going to spend the federal dollars that are coming in, to make sure that those dollars are reaching our small businesses in Maryland, that we're not sending those contracts out to huge international, national companies, but that money's staying here to support our economy, that we're working with our Black-owned businesses, our immigrant-owned businesses, our women-owned businesses, that we're improving the IT infrastructure in our tax system, right? We have our accounting system in the state of Maryland is the oldest accounting system in the nation, the IT infrastructure, which means we can't be nimble and can't support services that are needed or use data to drive decision-making. We need to update our IT systems and modernize. Finally, we need to build a great team and build an important team in the comptroller's office to staff all of those 12 field offices to make sure we're being present and proactive. So it's building in transparency and accountability, building a great team, and modernizing our system to do better for Marylanders.
Thank you. The next question will go to you first, Delegate Lierman. And you've both candidates, you've both kind of laid out your basic biographies, but we're going to ask the question a little differently. What makes you uniquely qualified to be comptroller, Delegate Lierman?
Sure. Well, everybody brings their different lived experience to the office. And I think my combination of representing working people, representing people with disabilities, working with businesses around the nation on procurement, coupled with my experience as a mother, as a parent, I know how much the cost of milk is and how much it's gone up over the past few years, as well as working in the legislature, on the appropriations committee, really understanding how the system works and how to do better, while also being able to be bipartisan. I've backed numerous bipartisan bills, and so I know and understand that the comptroller's office is not about partisanship, it's about partnership, right? It's about bringing people together to get big things done. And that's what I've demonstrated in the House of Delegates, I think, is that I'm able to work with people to identify challenges, brainstorm to understand how we can solve those challenges, and then bring those bills, that legislation, or maybe it's not legislation, maybe it's just connecting people, creating systems to get things done in a better way. And we need a comptroller who both cares about the details, right? Really sweats the small stuff of how these programs work, what the data is, making sure we're cutting out waste and fraud, but who also understands the big vision. And to get to the big vision, to get to a state where we're working for everybody and where the economy is growing and everybody can prosper, we have to be able to work together to do that. So I'm excited to bring, my ability to represent people, to work with to low-wage workers, to work with families, to work with legislators, to really use all of those skills, while also bringing my lived experience as a mom, as a woman working in Maryland, and bring my values that come with that to the Board of Public Works, to the tax collector's office, and as the elected CFO.
Thank you. County Executive Glassman, same question. What makes you uniquely qualified for the job?
Well, when I began this search to think about what my ending role would be after 30 years in public service, I believe that really the culmination of all that experience from working in local government, my years of president of the Maryland Association of Counties, 16 years in the legislature, but I can tell you the real experience as in local government as county executive, working through the pandemic, and really the experience you get from actually balancing a multi-billion-dollar budget, taking care of a pension system on your investments. We've been here in Harford County able to turn the county around. When I came into office, we had about a $8 million surplus that was left to us. When we close out the books here in October, we'll have $32 million fund balance. In addition to our rainy day fund, we've been able to accumulate 24 AAA bond ratings. At the same time, we provided the largest tax cut, property tax cut, to Harford Countyans in the history of Harford County, in addition to a 20% reduction for our veterans and senior citizens. So I've got the technical experience in addition to the legislative experience to make a good comptroller. I also think over the years, I've demonstrated the temperament and the ability to work in a nonpartisan way with folks from both sides of the aisle. And I think I would bring that temperament and balance to the Board of Public Works and to the Comptroller's office. And really going to be very important because I'm really the only candidate left that can bring that moderate check on one-party government in Annapolis. And I think I would be the right candidate if voters are looking to have that in the upcoming November election.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with you, Mr. Glassman. What role does the comptroller have, if any, in making the Maryland economy work for everyone?
Well, I think the comptroller does have the ability, not only on the Board of Revenue estimates, where you really need to look and be able to tell the legislature and the executive branch, how much revenue are expecting. Do you think you're bringing in enough money, or are you spending too much? But that kind of guidance, I think, will help the legislature and the executive branch in their deliberations. But on the Board of Public Works, I think the economy, when you're looking at contracts, to make sure the taxpayers' money is being spent wisely. And that means making sure those contracts are technically written correctly, that you're trying to get the service really spelled out so you don't get change orders, and really producing the type of service or goods that you're contracting for. And I think you help the rest of the economy to make sure that those bids go out to every segment, to make sure we're helping minority contractors across the board regionally. And I think that type of help will also assist those contractors when they bid and receive state funds in that contracting ability. And I do think you have to have support with the small businesses. I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's important to get out and communicate with small businesses on the ground to make sure that what they're feeling and seeing, that you can relate to, on not only in revenue estimating, but sharing there on the Board of Revenue. In Harford County during the pandemic, we were able to get out 4,000 small business grants during the pandemic to keep our restaurants and small businesses moving. As we got those things out in about 2 weeks, we used digital platforms, and we were a month ahead of the Commerce, and we were probably 2 months ahead of the federal government.
Okay, time's up, thanks. Delegate Lierman, same question. What role, if any, does the comptroller have in making the economy work for everyone?
Thank you for that. It's a really important question because the comptroller is the elected CFO of the state. And so, as I said before, it's really essential that as the elected CFO, the comptroller is looking at the big picture, right? And thinking about the future and what the future economic challenges are going to be. And is also thinking about now how the economy is working for us. The comptroller is uniquely situated in part because of its access to data, right, through the Bureau of Revenue Estimates. And I was happy to pass legislation to create much more transparency and accountability with the BRE, and to make sure that we're spending our dollars in a way that is supporting our Maryland economy, right? So the procurement process is just critical to how Maryland's government works for its residents. It's how we spend billions of taxpayer dollars every single year. And we need to make sure that we're getting best value for each and every tax dollar. And that means also making sure that our money is working in Maryland, right? That means ensuring that our money is going to Maryland businesses. That's part of getting best value. It means, and that will support, it means also that we need to, encourage state spending with small businesses, ensuring, if all our agencies that have state issued credit cards on procurement, that there's more transparency in the number of purchases, how much money is being spent and where it's being spent, so that smaller businesses can be part of that. I've met so many business owners over the course of my time in the legislature and the past 2 years who have no idea how to get involved in procurement or feel like the deck is really stacked against them. I recently met a Latina woman who started her own business who really struggled to get going with procurement. I met a Black woman who owns an architecture firm. We want all of the MBEs, these are MBEs in the state, to be bidding, because then we get a better value and the money of our state, it encourages our entire economy to do better. I've represented downtown Baltimore and numerous small businesses for years as their advocate, and I'm excited to bring that to the state level.
All right, thank you. Well, Delegate, well, all right. You kind of anticipated one of our questions, which is what changes would you make to the procurement process? But please feel free
Talk
to
about procurement.
continue the conversation, and then we'll have Mr. Glassman weigh in too.
Sure, I am happy to talk about procurement because procurement is, how we spend our dollars are really important with, are reflected in our values. And we have to make sure, and the comptroller's office is there to be an independent advocate and an independent voice for the people of Maryland on the Board of Public Works. And that's what I'm excited to be, ensuring we get best value for each dollar. Recently, a report came out that shows how our minority business enterprise program isn't working in the state. And there are so many changes that need to be made. We need to, one, improve subcontractor payment transparency and ensure that state subcontractors deserve to know, when primes are getting paid and how. We need to make sure, like I said, that even on those state issued credit cards, we're working to work with our small businesses and our MBEs. We need to reform and streamline the bidding process to make sure that it's clearer and there's more transparency. And one thing that has come up quite a bit is the problem that many of our small businesses and many of our MBEs have. They've been selected for a contract, and then they are waiting to be paid or waiting for the contract to start, and they don't have the money to float, the cash on hand to float. So we need to have a state revolving loan fund, a mobilization fund to provide access to capital for vendors who've secured contracts and are preparing for engagements with the state. And we need to end sole source contracts to make sure that we're getting best value. These are some of the things that I think will ensure that we are working, that we're meeting and exceeding our 29% MBE goals, that we're working across the state to support our small businesses. And when we're thinking about how we're doing contracting, to think about breaking up some of the biggest contracts so that our local vendors in different geographic areas can succeed as well. That's all work that I'm excited to help lead from the comptroller's office to ensure that our procurement system is working for the small businesses and the communities of Maryland.
Thank you. County Executive Glassman, what changes would you make to the procurement process?
Okay, I'm back now. I was a little.
Okay.
Thank you.
It
Thank you,
happens.
Josh, for that question. A couple of the things we would look at and what we've done here in Harford County, we've been able to save over $24 million in our first 8 years with some of the changes that we instituted here locally. In fact, we made enough savings in the first 2 years to fund our salary increases for our county employees. Right away on the front side, I think what I notice is to make sure that RFPs, the bids, are written in plain English, precisely on the service or the structure or the good that you're putting out a bid for. So many times I've found that contractors were having problems bidding on something because it wasn't clear. So they may have bid on it, and then we get a change order because we didn't say, well, I need 3 inches of crushed run on the base of this roadway or something like that. So it's important that those bids are written precisely. I also agree with Delegate Lierman. Another action that we've been trying to move forward is breaking up some of these larger contracts so our minorities and smaller businesses are in a position to bid and not have to worry about pre-qualifying for a huge project when they in fact could provide one of the services there. And we've begun to do that with some success also here in Harford County. And thirdly, I would just make sure as the people's really representative to make sure every dollar is spent wisely that comes through the Board of Public Works, because whether you're a Democrat, independent, or Republican, you expect the comptroller to look out for your tax dollars.
Okay, thank you. Sticking with you, County Executive Glassman, what restraints, if any, should there be on emergency contracts?
On emergency contracts,
Yeah,
I
there-
don't really, yeah, I'm not clear
just if
what you.
just if there should be any restraints, if there should be any constraints placed on the state's ability to hand them out.
Yeah, I don't really have a firm position on what the current restraints would be. I mean, I know the executive branch and the legislative branch would dictate policy there, but I don't envision any changes right off the top of my head.
Okay, Delegate Lierman.
Thank you. So unfortunately, during the pandemic, we saw a number of emergency, because we were in a state of emergency, we saw Governor Hogan take a number of actions to pass contracts that the Board of Public Works had not reviewed, and that there was no transparency around. So I was actually happy to lead the effort to ensure that there was public notice, and that there was notice to the legislature and other members of the Board of Public Works about emergency procurements, to ensure that even if those procurements were going to go through, because during a state of emergency, it is essential that the executive have a degree of, ability to be nimble and move quickly. But just because of that, we still need transparency around how our money is being spent and what is being contracted for. I mean, we saw contracts with some companies, some national companies, to handle the unemployment lines at the Department of Labor, to do COVID work that were tens and tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars, and that had horrible results. And there was very little accountability on the spending, and quite a bit of waste, and it just didn't work. And so we absolutely need to have more transparency around contracts when we're in a state of emergency. We need to maintain that ability for the executive to be nimble, but there needs to be more transparency, and the public needs to know where our money is going.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
The next question, you're up first, Delegate Lierman. The question is, what changes would you propose in the state retirement system? And before you jump in, I'm just going to add that I'm going to follow up with a question about some state investment policy, and including investments in fossil fuels. So let's talk sort of broadly first about any changes you propose to the state retirement system.
Well, I think that, those are two questions that are sort of the same.
Right. Yeah.
I've had the honor of serving on the Joint Committee on Pensions for 8 years. And when I first joined the legislature and joined the Committee on Pensions, we were not funding our pension system at the actuarial required amount ever. And so our pension system was really suffering as a result of it. Now, I'm proud that in my very first year in office, we passed legislation to require that the General Assembly fund the actuarial required amount every year. And we created a mechanism where we could actually overfund what was required to ensure that we were adequately funding our pension system every year. Right now, we're almost to 75% funded. 80% is really, the first big goal that we want to be at. And we're almost there. So I do think it's really essential that we lower the amount of fees that we are paying to our investment managers. And part of the way to do that is to bring more investment decisions in-house. We've started the process of doing that. I actually helped lead the effort to create more investment management teams in-house so that we could do that work and reduce the fees that we're paying. We need more transparency around the investment managements we have. We have to think through the challenge of climate risk and investment risk. And we have to make sure that we're working with a diverse set of investment managers to ensure that the money is being invested smartly and wisely moving forward. A pension system's a promise, and we have to make sure that we are fulfilling that promise to all of our state retirees. So I'm proud to have led the Oversight Committee or the Joint Committee on Pensions for the past few years, and I look forward to working on the pension system moving forward.
County Executive Glassman, would you propose any changes to the state retirement system?
Well, Josh, I think, first of all, the comptroller really has to be cognizant of the fact that there are employees, there are state employees that rely on this pension and count on it to be funded. Currently, it's just, I have 77%. So I'll give you a couple points credit, Brooks, instead of 75. But I would say the OPEB, the future obligations only 3% funded in the out years. In Hartford County, we are 100% funded. So I think the real focus needs to be on return to make sure that the investment and the returns are predictable and are going to provide security to those employees, those state employees who are going to be counting on their pension system in the future. And so we've got to think about returns and not get caught up too much in political whims on what may be popular, what might not be popular, but you need to look at the actual investment returns.
Okay. This next question is sort of along the same topic. It's actually a two-part question. We'll start with you, Mr. Glassman. Should state investment policy consider the social and environmental impacts of companies? And should Maryland's pension funds divest from fossil fuel interests? And if so, how could that be achieved?
I would think my really position is quite similar to what I just said. I think the board really needs to focus on investment return and not alter policy according to political whim, one way or the other. Now, there are certain investments that are onerous, I think, that we need to look at. I would not, I don't think a carbon neutral or a new policy such as that is probably realistic going forward. That's going to make sure that that pension fund is secure for our employees.
Okay, Delegate Lierman, should state investment policy consider the social and environmental impact of companies that the state invests in, and should Maryland's pension fund divest from fossil fuel interests?
Thank you for that question, Josh. So at the end of the day, the job of the Board of Trustees is to be a fiduciary for our pensioners, right? To make sure that we are getting the best returns. That is our sole priority. And as part of that, we have to understand investment risks. Years ago, we passed a bill, or I wasn't there, but the General Assembly passed a bill around Iranian divestment because it was so essential that the system have that flexibility to ensure that they could save our pension dollars. This year, we divested from Russia because it was so essential that the system not lose all of the value of its assets. And we have learned, because of mandated reporting, that an additional 2% of global warming would result in a 1.5% annum loss of returns from the system's funds within the next 10 years. We now do risk assessments every year because of legislation that we passed several years ago, climate risk assessments on our system to understand the challenge of climate risk and that it is investment risk. We know that all major investment firms around the state now, or around the country and the world, recognize that climate risk is investment risk. And it is an externality that must be taken into account when we're thinking about our investments. And if we don't take it into account, we are not being a good fiduciary, because like other risks, it's real, it exists, and we have to be wary of it. So this year, the State Retirement and Pension, the Joint Committee on Pension passed a bipartisan bill to declare, frankly, that climate risk is investment risk, and that the Maryland State Retirement and Pension System needs to consider the impact of climate change on investment risk and monitor our net zero aligned investments and climate solutions to ensure the long-term sustainability of our investment portfolio. That's a bill that I'm proud to have led on, and it's and as a member of the Board of Trustees, I'll keep working on that.
Okay, thank you. Next question to you, Delegate. And since time is running short, I'm kind of mushing a few questions together, so I apologize and hope they're still coherent. But the state has entered into a few large, public-private partnerships for big infrastructure projects. What do you think of the concept generally? And what is your position on the Hogan administration's plan to widen the Capital Beltway and Interstate 270 by entering into a public-private partnership with a company that's going to operate toll lanes on these roads?
For me first.
Yes.
So thank you, Josh. So I think that public-private partnerships can serve the public good. And if we are going to enter into P3s, as I'll call them, we have to make sure that they're situated in such a way to do just that. These are not taxpayer saving schemes, right? This is not about necessarily saving money. It's about doing something in a more streamlined way and getting it delivered in a streamlined way so that it works for Marylanders. However, as we have seen with the purple line, things can go very, very, very badly awry. We actually have a P3 at the Port of Baltimore that has been working very well, as opposed to the purple line, which has been a mess. And so I think that in order to truly evaluate and understand the ramifications of public-private partnerships for these huge P3s that are over $500 million, we need to have a more robust accountability, more robust review before they are approved. And we always need to understand whether doing something as a traditional procurement versus a P3 would be a better use of taxpayer dollars. Now, that is something we have not done on the 270-495 dilemma or a plan. The traffic is unsustainable. I sit in it all the time. We need to find a solution. But at the end of the day, before committing ourselves to a 50-year plan with a multinational corporation, we need that. And we don't have the evidence that it will actually alleviate all of the traffic we need it to. We do not know whether it is a better use of taxpayer dollars to do it this way or to do it as a traditional procurement. So I look forward to working with the Moore administration and the Moore Department of Transportation to ensure that we're creating a traffic alleviation plan for Marylanders.
Thank you. County Executive Glassman, your view on P3s in general and your position on the Hogan administration's toll lane plan for Interstate 495 and
Thank you,
270.
Josh. That's an important question. As a country boy up here in Harford County, I really have been baptized in the traffic around the Capitol Beltway during this campaign. I realized a couple of times I could see where I wanted to go, but it was still somehow 2 hours away. And I could have probably, as a runner, I could have probably done a 5K and gotten there in 20 minutes. Listen, I support the governor's program on the Capitol Beltway. And once I understand in procurement, there's some challenges and so forth. Once those technical challenges are solved or resolved, I do think the BPW should move ahead and approve those. As a county executive, I know every year you wait, particularly with where we are with inflation, labor shortages, and products, that every day you wait, the cost goes up. And it goes up quite a bit when you think about, well, really pushing projects back 6 months to a year. You would be astonished at 20% increases in the cost of projects. So I definitely would do that. We've had success with P3s on a local level, on a smaller level, with our crisis center, with Upper Chesapeake and different things. So it can work. I think you have to get the details worked out. But on these huge projects, I think it's essential that we move ahead with those.
Okay, thank you. And we'll stick with you, Mr. Glassman. The General Assembly took a lot of responsibility a few years ago away from the Board of Public Works for school construction contract awards and oversight. Would you seek legislation to have that reversed?
Well, you know, I've had the opportunity over the years to attend the Begathon back when I was a delegate and as a senator before. I do not miss going before the Board of Public Works and doing that. We've been able in Harford County to move our projects forward in a good fashion. So I'm not quite sure if I'd want to go back to that right now. For me, in Harford County on a local level, we are comfortable with the current system. I do think I do think we have some improvements that could be made in moving projects quicker. And I know a lot of county executives and commissioners talk about this in our local school boards, but the process is very slow to get from day one to get someone in a classroom. And so I think we should try to expedite and work with Maryland's counties on innovative ways and Baltimore City on innovative ways to move these projects quicker after they've been funded and are ready to go.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Lierman, same question.
Thanks for that, Josh. No, I think we want to reduce bureaucracy wherever possible. And so I support, the current plan as it is. And I will say, I have been very involved in school construction, working in Baltimore City, working with our school system, securing additional dollars. Despite the fact that County Executive Glassman voted against the Baltimore City school construction plan when he was a state senator, we have built nearly 24 brand new schools in Baltimore City. And so the plan is working quickly and working well. And we need to make sure, we passed the Built to Learn Act several years ago, which provided record funding for counties all over the state to build new schools and renovate their schools. And I want to make sure that the Comptroller's office is a partner to our local school districts, to our local governments, to help streamline the process wherever possible, to ensure that they can build new schools that are really worthy of our kids. I have a 4th grader and a pre-Ker right now in our local public school, and I understand how essential it is that when kids walk into a building, they recognize that they've been invested in, that it's a building that they can see that the adults in their lives have invested in them and care about their future. So I think that the system as it is right now is working. And as comptroller, I look forward to working with our public school systems across the state to make sure that we're building great schools quickly and easily.
Thank you. Believe it or not, we've reached the point where we only have time for one more question before your closing statement. So we're kind of playing triage here. I apologize. But this question is, we'll start with you, Delegate Lierman. And, it's a lot to pack in maybe to a 2-minute answer, but are the state's minority contracting programs sufficient, and what can be done to improve them?
Thank you for that. And I tried to address that a little bit in my earlier answer on procurement. I'd say the answer to the first question is no, they are not sufficient. And the answer to the second question is some of what I talked about, the need to have a mobilization fund to help MBEs to weather that time from when the contract is awarded to when the performance actually begins. We need to do more to streamline the process of applying for procurement and make sure our contracts are written in plain English and that they claim for and that they call for best value and not always lowest cost, which is not best value. And we need to make sure that the Comptroller's office is really working in communities with the agencies around the state to ensure that people know what contracts are available and how to prepare and get ready for those contracts. And finally, I'd say we need to break up some of those those really big contracts to make sure that they're smaller so that more people can apply, they're more streamlined, and that we end up getting a better deal for our dollar. And then one other thing that's not exactly on those big procurements, but that's sort of on the small stuff that's really essential are those state credit cards, right? All the agencies, they can walk around, they have credit cards to charge things on. We need more transparency for how you get on the approved vendor list, right? And to make sure that new businesses that are MBEs, are women-owned businesses, are Black-owned businesses, are immigrant-owned businesses, that they can get on that approved vendor list as a way to begin to build their businesses and then get to the larger procurements. So the Department of Legislative Services issued a great and important report this year on our MBE program, which is the oldest in the country, but it's not living up to its promise. And I promise to be an advocate and make sure that we bring people together to address its challenges so that it can be everything we need it to be.
Thank you. County Executive Glassman.
So Josh, I'm gonna get you back on time and save you some. Delegate Lierman and I agree on this. I think we both share some of those very similar objectives on improving procurement and bidding process for our minorities and folks across the state. And I think part of that we both talked about earlier too is making sure that digital infrastructure is strong enough to get out to somebody on their smartphone or across the state, no matter what size business you are, whether you're a single woman business or a larger business. Those bids have to get out and notices have to get out and be transparent, and that we should be as efficient and innovative enough to get them out mobily to everyone in this day and age.
Okay, very good. Sadly and incredibly, we've come to the end of the line, and now it's time for each candidate to offer a closing statement of up to 3 minutes. And I guess we'll begin with you, Mr. Glassman.
Well, thank you again to Josh and all the folks that helped put this forum on this evening. I appreciate it, getting a chance to talk to everyone and share some of my thoughts and ideas. I think as we look at the election here in November after the primary, that if voters, and I understand Republicans, Democrats, Independents, when they look at their ballots, really need to make a choice. I think whether they want a moderate check on one party government in Annapolis, or do you want a different eye? Do you want someone from the other party to take a look and participate not only on the Board of Public Works, but revenue estimating and the number of different issues that the Comptroller does. I'm excited about where Maryland is heading. I know that local governments, our counties, our county executives, our commissioners who I've worked with for the last 8 years with the Maryland Association of Counties, I know we're on the ground floor. And I like to say that's where rubber meets the road, and we've worked together well. I've got the temperament as I've traveled the state during the campaign, but also traveled the state representing all our counties, rural, metropolitan, and Western Maryland. And so I think I have really the combination of experience to be a good representative. And I do like to say watchdog of the taxpayer. So as an old sheep farmer, I would tell you a good shepherd's watchdog doesn't just sit back and wait. They look and constantly review to make sure everything is safe. And as a watchdog, as a comptroller, I would just always be on the lookout to make sure that our tax dollars, whether you're a Democrat, Independent, or Republican, you all pay taxes and make sure that those dollars are spent wisely. So I thank you for taking a look at our campaign. I've been endorsed by Governor Hogan, by the Maryland Farm Bureau, and by the Fraternal Order of Police for our work in public safety, land preservation, and a number of other issues. So take a look at our website at barryglassman.com. Let me know if you have any questions, and I appreciate you taking a look at our campaign for Comptroller. God bless you all.
Thanks so much, Delegate Lierman.
Thank you so much, Josh. And thank you again to the League of Women Voters for having us on and for all of the important work that you do, and Maryland Nonprofits and Maryland Matters. Look, this is the most important state election in our lifetime. And we have the opportunity to elect leaders who are going to deliver for us, not just for the next 4 years, but really who are setting us up for the next 40 years to come. And we have to use this opportunity, this election, to ensure that we elect leaders who have a record of really delivering results, who will be bold so we can all do better, right? Maryland needs a comptroller, I believe, who understands how budget decisions in Annapolis impact your family in Montgomery County or Garrett County or the Lower Shore and everywhere in between. And I've traveled to all those places and will continue doing that. But we also know we need a comptroller who knows how much a room in assisted living costs this year and the price for a week of summer camp, right? Maryland needs a comptroller who has experience diving into the details of complex policy and has a record of passing bipartisan common sense legislation, and who knows how to hold agencies accountable, but also who understands the importance of our businesses as job creators and wealth builders. And finally, I really believe Maryland needs a comptroller who embraces creative ideas and has the courage to put those ideas into action, right? Someone who from big ideas on wealth building activities and policies, but also someone who sweats the small stuff and will just focus on making it easier for families and businesses to pay taxes and access state programs and benefits. That's who I am. Plus one more, right? As I mentioned, I understand that the Comptroller's office is not about partisanship. It's about partnership. It's about being bold and doing better for Maryland families and small businesses. It's about the person and not the party. And we need someone to be present and proactive who shares our values. I'm proud to be the only pro-choice candidate for Comptroller. I'm proud of my record of service, of working in a bipartisan way. And I'm proud to be ready to be an independent voice seeking best value for our tax dollars on the Board of Public Works. We're at a very critical juncture in this state, right? We have some of the most prosperous communities in the nation, but we also have far too many who continue to suffer from poverty, from disinvestment, and from the effects of the pandemic. I'm really proud to have the support of our current comptroller, Peter Francho. If anyone knows how to do the job, it's him. I'm proud to have support of Maryland's teachers, our environmental groups, our labor unions, and more, the firefighters. And I'm proud to be running on a ticket with Wes Moore, Aruna Miller, and Anthony Brown. This year, I know that we can go to the ballot boxes and decide that we want to be bold, do better, and break a glass ceiling along the way. So I hope that I can earn your support to be Maryland's next comptroller. Thank you.
Thank you. First, thank you so much to the candidates for participating, for putting yourselves out there as candidates. It's not easy. Thanks for your service, both of you. Thank you. And thanks to the audience for joining us tonight. A reminder, a YouTube video of the forum will be available in a few days. Everyone who's watching tonight who registered will receive an email with the link. Please share it with your friends and family. Please remember to vote. And also please remember that there are a couple of upcoming forums still. There will be one with 4 candidates for governor on October 13th at 7 o'clock. And then there will be conversations with the 2 candidates for Attorney General that will be up on the University of Baltimore Public Affairs YouTube channel sometime next week too. So with that, thank you and good evening to one and all.